Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Business with Integrity podcast. And today I am stoked to have my good friend, Sean Myer. Believe it or not, this is the second time that we're doing this. The first time we did this, unfortunately, the recording didn't go through, but this conversation needed to happen. And just a little bit of backstory on Sean. Sean is one of the most talented music producers that I've ever met in my life. Double platinum award-winning music producer. And there's a lot of things as I've gotten to know him that I'm excited to bring to you inside of this conversation. Things all the way from, achieving mastery to what does it actually take to make a hit, and how does that actually relate to business, which I think you'll be very, very surprised at the connections that we're going to make to conversations that me and him have had about productivity, problem solving, and so much more. So with that being said, Sean, welcome to the show.
Greetings. Thank
Welcome,
you, man.
man. Thanks for agreeing to do this again.
Yeah, of course. Of course. When in Bali.
In Bali.
Yeah.
That's right. We're both in Bali
Crazy.
right now.
Yeah. Wild. Wow.
And I think that's actually probably a good place to start, because this whole trip was very spontaneous for you.
Yeah.
I know it's something that you decided to say yes to last minute. And it's so interesting because I'm in this place in my life where I'm being more spontaneous than I've ever been as well. And so I'm kind of just curious, just as a way of just getting us going in this conversation, tell me a little bit about that and kind of your decision to be here and, what this trip's all about for you.
Yeah, man. Spontaneity has not been a strength of mine in my life. I think I've always been so, regimented and, scheduled. And I love structure. And over the past year, for those that know Michael Singer, the act of surrender has just been, a major theme in my life. And, learning to let go and learning to flow with life is a challenge, but the rewards have been, immeasurable. And I think, Bali is the next evolution of that. As I'm learning to let go of, small things, this is a place in the world where you really just gotta surrender. You can't one of the first things, everyone was telling me when I got here was just, Bali has its own time. You don't schedule things here. And I
don't know about you, but that makes me cringe a little bit.
I know. It's nerve-wracking because what's on the other side of surrender? You don't know. It's like the fool in the tarot, just jumping over the cliff and just trusting that there's something there.
So I find this fascinating as a place for us to kick off because I think, at least in terms of the conversations that are taking place in the mainstream, this conversation of surrender, if you will, which seems to be something that's coming up, is not really something that you would think is talked about at an elite level. No,
it's the opposite. Like hustle culture and, the material world is like, it's like we're all trying to figure out how to best manage the Legos of life and how to, build things with these Legos. But, it's not necessarily Legos we're dealing with. It's more like water,
So one I think the first conversation that we had, you brought up a good friend of yours, which you are business partners with, which is a guy called Major.
Yeah.
And you told me about one of the things that really stood out to you about him is that when you were in the studio with him, the first thing that he had the people who were there to make music with was to sit down in meditation.
Yeah. that was a mind-blowing experience because I'd never done that before. You know, I'd done it in my personal practice, and just, I'm not saying, you know, I'm a world-class meditator or anything. Like I'm like, I'm not claiming to be, you know, a yogi or anything, but I would meditate frequently, and I had, you know, a strong, you know, sense of spirituality within myself. And, you know, I would talk about it a lot in my daily life, you know, but it wasn't necessarily like, you know, my identity as a producer, you know, so I never really brought that into sessions as like, oh, maybe I could meditate in a session with people, you know, that was just so foreign. And the first day I met Major, we were working on this song, and mind you, the song is like, if you compartmentalize the song alone, it was such a mind-blowing song, like We Are the World kind of song. So it had energy in it already like that. And the precursor to the session was like a 15-minute meditation. And we just sat there. I think we pulled up some guided thing on YouTube. And man, like the energy, the calmness, the sort of, you know, I think creativity is more so channeled than it is, you know, putting pieces together.
Yes.
And, you know, we were all tapped in that day. I could feel it. And, you know, the song has yet to come out. I believe it will come out.
I was about to ask you, what's the song?
No, it hasn't
like a
come
big
out.
mystery.
I can't speak too much on the song, but it has, like, every time I play that song, it has this energy and quality to it that's just like, you know, it's like a blanket. It's like everyone gathering around the campfire, you know, holding hands. Yes. And I don't think we could have achieved that had we not, you know, done that meditation. Like there was an energy that brought to the session. And also, you know, him and I became, you know, brothers. Like I genuinely feel like I gained a brother that day. Yeah. And, you know, it was a triad that day. It was my other brother, you know, brother from another mother, Joshua Golden, incredible songwriter, artist that I, you know, have worked with for over 10 years at this point. Him, Major, and I, and you know, that I find one-on-one is a very interesting, you know, dynamic in sessions. Something's happening with my throat. I feel it, you know. Does that ever happen to you? Like when you're speaking, you can almost feel like something bubbling up. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's interesting. Maybe it's the podcast. My first podcast, you know, breaking through that little wall in my throat.
Yeah.
I feel like, you know, one-on-one is a really good strategy in sessions. I love it. I love, you know, seeing someone eye to eye. Your eyes aren't like this. They're like this. You know, there's a really deep connection. But when you have a third in a session, that's an insane, you know, trinity where you have like this, you have the pair, but then you also have, you know, the outside perspective. And when it's like, you know, it's kind of like the old phrase, you know, yours, mine, and God's. It's like in perspective, you know, when you bring that into a session, it's very quick the way things move. It's very, I love either, you know, 3 or 2 in a session, because it just, you know, the dynamic, the chemistry that happens between, like, the harmony of that is really powerful when you have an outside perspective to kind of help with your blind spots and stuff like that, you know. And there's something just energetically, I think, with like that balance of 3. You know, you'd think that balance was 1 and 1, but adding a third is like, it's really cool.
There's so many places I want to take this conversation. There's one thing that I kind of really want to say for everybody listening is that I think one of the tendencies that a younger version of myself would have is that I would listen to people who were in completely different domains than I was, and I would say, oh, that's a great conversation. How does this apply to me? And one of the beliefs that I've been able to take on, where I believe all of my best ideas come from today, is listening to people who've achieved mastery in a different industry, completely different than mine.
Oh, I love it.
And then ask myself, how does that relate to me? And then I call that a normal old idea from a different industry. When put into a new industry, people call that an innovation.
Wow. Yeah. So true.
So going deeper into this theme, I think there's kind of a couple threads here. So the power of working with someone one-on-one, or taking that to another level in terms of creating a triad as a way of being able to brainstorm in a way where something magical can take place in that creative process. But I want to, before we kind of dive deeper into that, I want to come back to this concept of surrender, because I think as entrepreneurs or creatives, I think it's just something that's not talked about enough. And, or I know for me, for a long time, I just had such a negative connotation associated to it. Like, what do you mean surrender? Like, I want to plan, I want to know exactly what I'm doing, and I want to control the situation. And I remember a mentor of mine, which really like had just an incredible impact on my life 6 years ago. I was able to reconnect with him this past week. And he had this concept of making space for something better. Making space for something better. Well, what does that mean to you?
First thing I get just visually, because I'm such a, I know audio is my bread and butter, but I'm such a visual learner as well. The first thing I get is, a room full of furniture, and if you're constantly latching on to old furniture, old tables, things with holes in them, you're never gonna spice up your place. You're never gonna, it's all gonna be just everything torn to shreds, and it's gonna be crowded. It's gonna be a hoarder's domain, And in order to keep things fresh and to keep things lively and updated, you have to make space, It's quite literally in a room, you have to make space. You have to take something out, or else it's just going to get too crowded to the point where it's a storage container,
But let's get into practical pieces, right? Because I think, again, I think creatives, entrepreneurs, they'll listen to this and be like, okay, that sounds like a great idea, but how? How do I actually do that?
Yeah.
Let's go into the actual, let's look at it through the lens of making a song, and let's see how we might be able to apply this to entrepreneurship.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you're in the creative process. Maybe an artist has a particular vision of something they want to create. As an entrepreneur, you have a vision of a business that you want to create, and you're bringing that to your team, which is now the collaboration process. Walk me through that. Walk me through, you think you're starting off in a linear line, but then you come into this messy kind of creative process, and you think you're going to end up somewhere, but you end up somewhere else. Walk me through that actual creation process, how you arrive at something better. How do you even create space for that? How do you do that?
It's such a journey, different journey that's even making space, actually. So allowing, when I work with an artist or a songwriter, I do pitch music, which is essentially, work with other producers, writers, and sometimes artists, together, to create something that, you don't know the home yet, or maybe it's intended to go to an external home. Meaning
you're creating a song with intention of selling it to
a
well-known artist that then they claim as their own hit.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So you're pitching it, you know. And another thing that I actually love to do even more is be in the room with the artist, you know, and really craft a world and craft, you know, which oftentimes starts with experimentation, you know, which is ironic, but, you know, crafting a space that, you know, then is like a avalanche, like a snowball effect, you know, it just kind of, you know, parlays into itself. And, you know, when you're creating a song, I could go into the room and have a very, you know, structured way of doing it. You know, like sometimes I'll go in, if I was to give, you know, a new producer, like a you know, outline of how I make a song, I would say, you know, you go into the studio and you open up your laptop and you start making a beat, and then you keep it simple, you know, maybe a little bit of drums, if even that, and some chords, and then you start writing to it. And you literally write to like the most minimal thing that you can. You create the song, and then you finish the production around the vocals, and that way it's all, you know, synchronistic. You don't have, you know, two things kind of detached. You have like the intertwinement, you know, but things work differently every time, you know. That's a good starting point. Sometimes I have, you know, a 2-hour conversation, you know, just to get to catch up or get to know someone. Sometimes, you know, so many times the lyric or the concept of the song comes from that conversation too, you know. And if I went into the room being like, I have to, you know, start right now on this song because I have, you know, 8 hours to do this with this artist. We have, you know, one day together, you know. Oftentimes I actually prefer 2 because I like the first day to be more catching up and vibing, and then second day really like
doing the work.
Yeah, exactly. It's the best. Best is 2 days. And camps are even better, you know, where you just lock out.
Like a boot camp type thing.
Yeah, exactly.
An immersion, time of immersion.
Yeah, for sure. In business context, yeah, like an immersion. But yeah, man, like I think the space, like the freedom, so much creativity just drops in from there. You know, a concept can drop in, a lyric, okay. Like someone will be just playing guitar on the couch or something, and like different things. Like you never know where that seed is going to come from, and then when you hear it, you know.
So this reminds me of something that I found myself saying yesterday, which was this idea of overly committed / tightly scheduled entrepreneurs and creatives can't transform themselves. So if you're overly committed, if you have no space to actually think, to be a visionary, to do the creative work, you can't transform yourself. You can't actually create great work. Because the space isn't there. The space isn't there to actually come up with something better. Yeah. So one of the commitments that I've made in my life, which has been a massive stretch for me because my tendency is actually obsession. Mm-hmm. And I want to work all the time. I enjoy it.
Same.
Like a lot.
Yeah.
And one of the hardest decisions that I ever made, but also one of the most rewarding and fun decisions I ever made in my life was make the decision to actually take time off and to commit to fun. And difficult thing to do because it's like, these tendencies of like, I'm getting left behind, or like, I don't know, someone's doing something that I'm not doing, or whatever it is, whatever story I'm telling myself.
Yeah.
And I've committed to now taking 150 days off a year.
That's
150 days off a year. That's wild, right?
Wow.
Yeah. And so just for context, I mean, that's about 6 weeks off a year, not including weekends. However, I also don't operate from a place of like, I take every weekend off. Sometimes I'll work 7 days a week and I'll do that for weeks. And then I might take 2 weeks off. So that includes my weekend.
Yeah.
You know, and yeah, it's a lot, but I also feel that my brain is sharper than it's ever been. I feel that my ability to connect dots and, I mean, this is literally like making space for something better, you know? And I think the hardest thing to do as a visionary and as a creative is to bring the level of thinking every single day that's actually going to lead to the kind of breakthrough work that we want.
Yeah.
And
totally.
I would consider, if you're a visionary entrepreneur, I would say you're creative, right? Because your job is to refine the vision, to actually create something that's bigger than you, to give people something that they actually believe in, that your team believes in, that the people who you're trying to engage in this vision believe in, whether that's your investors, your customers, you know, and everyone in between.
Yeah.
Yeah. So anyways, like just as you were saying that, what was coming for me is like, well, how do I do that? Right.
Yeah.
And one of those ways is actually taking, like you're saying, physical space. Well, I'm saying taking actual free days off. And during those free days, like actually committing to fun.
Yeah.
Which is also another way to make, and we had a whole conversation about this yesterday. And I'll share a quick story related to that, which was the story of this little boy called Mana. Had a really amazing brother, which I have a lot of love for, named Ika, and his wife Lila, who lost their 10-year-old boy this past year, and died from a very rare brain cancer. And what was so crazy about his story was that at 9 years old, he started asking himself, what's the purpose of life? Now, I don't know a lot of 9-year-olds who ask that question, which, you know, tells you the kind of boy that he was, but also in some ways, like, you know, like, okay, what's going on there? Makes you ask that.
Yeah.
And there were many moments throughout the course of that year where his parents thought they were going to lose him. And the day before what happened, what I'm about to share, happened, like massive scare. But he was there the next day, and he was that bubbly personality that everyone knew him for. And it was in the morning, and his parents are laying in bed with him. And he says, Mama, Papa, I think I figured it out. Parents are like, you figured it out? Like, what do you mean? The purpose of life. I think I figured it out. Like, oh, really? Well, tell us about it, you know? And then he gets really serious for one moment, and then he looks at his parents and he says, fun.
Wow.
Purpose of life is to have fun.
Wow.
And then he goes on to say, I really didn't want to be here. As you can imagine, the amount of suffering and pain that he was going through. The surgeries, the treatments, all the things. And he says, I really didn't want to be here, but now I really want to be here. And now I think I'm actually going to get better because of it. And that wasn't his story. His story wasn't to get better. But I think that, you know, from a very unlikely pace, you know, one of the codes that I got in that process was actually committing to taking that time off and actually committing to having more fun in my everyday life, which was, you know, my version of creating something better.
Wow.
Creating space for something better, I should say.
Yeah.
And so many like revolutionary ideas and how my vision has refined itself in that process.
Wow. Chills. Yeah. It's a reminder to me as well, you know, I become obsessive about work as well. You know, I have to finish what I start, and I start a lot of things, you know.
You and me both, man.
I know.
No correlation to finishing.
Yeah. But, you know, I find myself going to sleep sometimes being like, do we really only have 24 hours? Like, can't I buy some like extra credits? You know, like why are we so limited to 24 hours? Because there's just so many things that I want to do. You know, I'm laying there in bed, and that's the time where all the ideas start kicking in too. Because you know, we talked about that brain state where you're just, you know, really in you know, just creative mode in between sleep and awake, and it's just nonstop. But because of that, you know, I really enjoy creative problem solving and just, you know, clicking things into place, you know, finding that one outlier puzzle piece and finally like putting it in that aha moment. Like I love that feeling in a song where it's like you're searching all over for this tiny ass puzzle piece that's like may or may not even exist, you know? And finally you find it and you place it in and you're like, this all makes sense now. You know, I just get like a rush even thinking about that feeling. You know, that's one of my favorite feelings of like creativity and just making something when it all just clicks into place. But there's like that to me is fun, you know, it's fulfilling, but I know it's not, there's a purpose and an intention to it that feels productive. And I think, you know, it's a self-inflicted, you know, sort of system or you know, pusher that I have internally and I think we all have these different archetypes, but you know, you and I seem to have this internal pusher that, you know, always wants to be pushing for something to get done and to create, you know, with the intention of like building something and giving something to the world. And, you know, fun to me, like actually going on, you know, a vacation and like sitting there and not doing anything.
Dude, the idea of that to a certain extent,
horrifying.
Honestly, it just makes me cringe.
Right? But why, like, there's value in that.
Right.
It's ironic, but there actually is value in that. And I think that's something that a lot of, you know, business-minded people can, you know, apply to their own lives. And I'm starting to see, you know, the returns on investment in that, the ROI of fun is huge.
Massive.
You know, it's because it gives you that space to then think differently. You know, who said, is it Einstein that said, you know, you can't solve a problem from the same place you were thinking it? What is the quote? I'm butchering it.
Yeah, you can't solve a problem at the same level of thinking that created the problem.
Yeah. Was that Einstein?
I don't know who it was, but that's the quote.
Yeah. Yeah, that quote is genius. And it's basically, you know, I think when you're having these fun experiences, you know, the pusher wants to resist. It wants to say, there's no value in this. I'm not making something. So how in the world can this be, you know, valuable in my life?
Right.
You know, where's the return? But it's a longer game.
That's right.
And sometimes even immediate, you know, your restored health and excitement and curiosity, like all those little things that, you know, actually like a curiosity is what drives innovation, you know, an excitement is the energy, it's the passion that goes into innovation and into these things. And, you know, just having hard work, like getting up, drinking your coffee and then going, you know, straight into business, that can be productive, but you got to have passion. You got to have, you know, the spark, and fun, I think, is equivalent to spark, you know?
So it's interesting, man. Like, I think there's so many ways to unpack that. For me personally, as an entrepreneur, that spark comes from having a compelling vision. And I think this vision refines itself from the fun that I create in my life, because what it does is it creates almost like this true limitless horizon for what's possible. You know, I think about like when I went to Burning Man this past year and just gave myself that experience. It was the first time in my entire life, my entire professional life, where I took 2 weeks and didn't look at my phone. And in that, what's incredible about Burning Man is you kind of just see things that don't make sense in reality.
I can imagine.
And so it's like this massive wide horizon to like dream within the context of having fun for what's possible. But that is valuable because what it does is it refines your vision. So like even this podcast right now and everything that surrounds it, like wouldn't even be a thing if I didn't have that experience, because it became clear to me that this is what life was calling me to do as a result of that experience that I had.
Wow.
And so then what happens is that I think that excitement, because you can have ideas, but that doesn't mean that they're going to excite you long term, because it's work. And work can feel heavy sometimes if there isn't a compelling reason to do that work. And so like before I even started to lift one finger in terms of building what is now being spread in the world and through this work is I literally took a month to write a 32-page document that basically describes my vision for what is it I'm creating, because I knew that my vision wasn't going to be possible by me doing it. It was going to be possible if I got clear on what was supposed to happen, and if I can recruit the best people to make it happen, because the vision isn't mine. Actually, it's a bigger vision for the world. And in doing so, I knew I was going to attract the kind of customers and clients that would be such a thrill to surround myself around, that I would just like pinch myself every single day that I get to work with the people I get to work with. And as a result of that, and the revenues coming in, I get to have the kind of impact that I want to have by actually giving back to the things that were important to me. And then it was like, man, it's the end of the day. I get to do that every single day. Like, that's pretty exciting. And so it's really interesting. I had this thought that, you know, I have a vision of my life right now that scares the crap out of me. And so I asked people, and I'm curious for you to potentially reflect on, like, at times where you felt so freaking engaged by the music, like, did you have a vision for your life and where you wanted to take your career that just scared the crap out of you? And because of that, and maybe even something that was potentially even bigger than you, because I feel like I've had visions that were all about me that got me so far. I feel like I made those visions real, and then I just felt depressed. Right. And even, you know, as an entrepreneur, like, you go so deep down that depression, you get even borderline suicidal, which was definitely part of my story, a very earlier version of myself.
Wow.
But I feel like as that vision grew to be something so much larger than me, it almost feels like this spiritual energy, like uplifting me and directing me towards doing that. Like it's not my vision, it's our vision.
I heard this quote once. I think it was Josh actually that told me this. Life supports that which supports life. How good is that?
Got chills all over my body.
There you go.
Wild.
Yeah. Like, there's an energy that comes in, a support that comes in, you know, anytime you expand your vision from just yourself to the world, or even your community, you know, like, or to you and another person. Like, if you bring it out, you know, it amplifies, you know? And I think the piece that, you know, clicked into place for you was like, you know, expanding your vision from like a personal vision to a world vision, you know? And understanding that to do that, you are the spokesperson, you're the, you know, the author of that. But, you know, it's like giving birth to a child that's going to go have its own experiences and, you know, transform into someone that you have to let it go and do its own thing and interact with the world in the way that it's meant to. You know, you can't micromanage your child.
That's right.
You know, it's going to rebel.
That's right. That's right. So it's like our job is to clarify the vision. And if our work is meant to engage other people, is to give them that vision, get out the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have an area I would love to go into, which is this concept of mastery. And we were talking about last time that we were having this conversation about the value of an apprenticeship and like, you know, what that can really do to catapult someone's life and career. And it's so interesting because I'm just connecting the dots about a book that I read many years ago called Mastery by Robert Greene, where he literally talks about this in one of the very early chapters of like, if you want to achieve mastery and want to accelerate your path to mastery, then find somebody who's done the thing you want to do and go and learn from them, shadow them. And that can work wonders in terms of really catapulting.
Who would have thought?
So yeah, I know that definitely has been your story. Yeah. And I know that, you know, part of the story that you've shared with me, and I'm curious for you to go deeper into this, is that at a certain point in your life, I think you were a teenager at the time, you were gifted an electric guitar, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. And you started playing it. Guitar. Yeah. And as you were playing this guitar, like it sounded nothing like what you thought it would or how you saw the rock stars out there playing it, and you just literally put it under your bed. Yeah. And you're like, fuck this. Yeah, yeah. And then it stood there for many years, and then you had a friend over, and when that friend came over, somehow the conversation about the guitar came up, and you realized that the reason it wasn't working is because it wasn't plugged into an amp. And then when you plugged into an amp, you were like, whoa, like this is what it's supposed to sound like.
Oh my, it's but so cringy, like looking back. Yeah. I'm like, yeah.
But what that led to was that it really ignited this passion for music. And I know your story is that you found an apprenticeship. You went to a particular music school with people who were actually actively working in the music industry. So talk us through that story.
Man, like, even it's just been so synchronistic, you know, and it's funny because I can backtrack it to all these little, you know, checkpoints along the way that really just, you know, you couldn't have thought them into existence. You know, the reason I even started playing guitar or, you know, rediscovered that was because of crazy allergies, you know. Like I hated being outside in a way because, you know, I would just get flooded with like sneezes and coughs, and my eyes like couldn't even see sometimes when I'd go outside. And so I spent a lot of time indoors and, you know, just finding things to do, like playing guitar. But then, you know, we in high school we would, you know, play around and just, you know, write songs, like early like almost like primal version of songwriting, you know. And it happened so quick, like a song a day. And
oh wow,
I think, you know, it was just complete flow. Like we were just experimenting. And it's really interesting because, you know, we were doing guitar with rap, which, you know, is inspired like melodic rap, which wasn't a thing at the time. You know, the only person that I had known doing melodic rap was Nelly, you know. Legend. And lo and behold, you know, I'll add a few steps in between. So
for people who don't know who Nelly is, just for context.
Nelly is, a legend. He's also, he's a rapper, but he's a singer. You know, he's from St. Louis, where I was born. And he is just, you know, he had songs like Dilemma, Hot in Here, Ride With Me, you know, big classic, like
pretty much if you've been to a party anywhere in the world, chances are you've probably heard one of those 3 songs.
Yeah. And what a dynamic duo, him and J.E. J.E. is like, legendary producer, also from St. Louis, I believe. Had the chance to meet him, and it was just, such a cool thing to see, like, this guy that all these sounds came from, so many inspiring sounds, like energy in those records, energy.
Right.
Like you listen to those and it's like, obviously it's part of the, nostalgia, you feel the nostalgia when you listen to it and that gets you going. But also the reason they were hits to begin with was because there was energy to them and creativity.
And that's a piece I want to circle back on. I know we had some conversations about that yesterday and how creating that energy in a record actually is so closely correlated to what it actually takes to put out messaging in the world that people resonate and have that visceral response to in the same way that a record would.
Yeah.
But before we get there, so you went to school.
So I, was in high school, public school, and I just felt like a number. I always remember literally saying, I feel like a cattle being herded through these like little hallways, into the next class and the next class, whatever. And I just really could not wait to get out of there. Like I was like, none of this applies to what I want to do. On one hand, I'd broken my thumb, shattered it actually. And I remember going to get surgery on it. And as I'm, walking down, the parking lot, I see a Ford GT and I'm like, that's a badass car. That's really cool. Why is that in a, operating facilities, parking lot? And it was the anesthesiologist. And I was like, kind of joking with the anesthesiologist. Like he was just like a sort of a comedian when I went in. And I remember he was there, a couple hours and dipped. Like that was his day. And he had a really fun lifestyle, it seemed. He was helping people, but also really like living. And that seemed really cool to me, like impact, but also, being able to really live. And so I, on one hand, I wanted to be an anesthesiologist. And then on the other hand, I discovered music and I was just like, this is my path. Like I was like, this is my fallback. Right. Like I could go really into school, which I was getting straight A's up to this point.
God bless you, man.
But then I just discovered music and I'm like, none of this applies. This feels, my intuition, like I can feel a magnetism.
Right.
No other way to describe it. Just
pulling you in that direction.
Yeah. Literally pulling like into each scenario.
And so what happens? You were feeling this magnetism towards music and then...
Yeah. So I go to this school, this charter school. Had to get accepted.
So not typical university. It was a charter school focused
It was a charter school focused on like creative arts. So I go there, graduate a year early against the, advice of my teachers. And, I'm hanging out at home for about 3 months after I graduate, and I get this random DM on Facebook. And this guy basically says, hey, I saw you graduated 3 months ago. Nelly just opened a school in St. Louis. I think you should check it out. Mm-hmm. He's like, I interviewed him. He was a, journalist and nice. In St. Louis. And I'd never spoken to this guy before. Like or never met him.
I feel them call that faith. Then I don't.
That it was wild. And so I called them.
Yeah.
Called him up. The school is run by Blue Bolden, who if I'm remembering correctly, she was like part of Nelly's management team. It was founded by Nelly and Vatterott College in St. Louis. It was like a partnership. And to an engineer, Carl Napa, legend, and producer Wishmaster, Adam Charrington. And those four were the core team of the school. And I was like, how many people are going here? Like, this, is it,
Must be a big thing.
Must be a big thing. 7 people. 7 fucking people. I got on a plane so quick, flew there, met with everyone. It was dead. It was like just a massive like facility downtown St. Louis
with 7 people. So here's what I'm curious about. I'm curious to understand, because you go to the school.
So I go to the school and I meet them and I'm like, this is my home, right?
You were there for 2 years?
Yeah, 2 years. So I soaked it up. I was like, no one else is here. I'm going to be in here every day. And I'm going to be, going to the sessions, assisting.
You were in the studio assisting every day.
Yeah, my first session on my 18th birthday, because I was 17. I tried to get into other schools beforehand, and was rejected because I was 17. I was too young. They're like, come back when you turn 18. And so on my 18th birthday, I'll never forget this. I was a runner, not even like assistant. I was just like thrown into being a runner.
You got to start somewhere.
And I was grabbing coffee and mints for Yo Gotti. He came in and he was working, in the studio. And that was surreal. The first session.
And for people who don't know who that is.
Incredible rapper, like legend. I think he's Memphis, but it go down in the DM, huge song. Yeah. Like that was later on, but even prior to that, he had hits, legendary rapper. So it was like a full-fledged recording studio facility, everything, Carl engineering. Mind you, Carl had like he was like Nelly's right-hand engineer. So he was doing like a lot of projects with that too. And one of the first things I ever, assisted on, and by assist, I mean, like patching cables, like, all right, I'm taking this vocal out of Pro Tools and patching it into this compressor. What do you think you
got out of this time? So fast forward 2 years, like what do you get out of it?
Well, so this song, that one night that I went in, I was patching cables, I hear, baby, you're a song, you make me want to roll my windows down and cruise. And I was like, that's a really cool song. A couple weeks later, I hear this shit on the radio. It was Nelly's remix of Cruise, Florida Georgia Line. And, I couldn't take any ownership over it. Like I was just, moving cables around. But the coolest thing about that experience was, here's this like obscure place in the middle of like downtown St. Louis. No one in the world knew we were like
recording.
Yeah. No one had any idea about this thing. And then it just blasts off from this random place and everybody's singing it.
I find that to be the coolest thing ever. Like that you can just like be doing your thing, creating something, and then other people are on the receiving end of that creation. Just like that.
Yeah. And that gave me the confidence, music it's not about the tools. It's not about, it's not about anything other than just, creating something amazing and then really just like putting it in the right hands, and then it's like a trickle down, It's why it's really important to not just, sign a big deal and get lost in the system, like to really have quality of relationships. Like, it goes from like the tip of the iceberg or the tip of the pyramid down to, if a few key players in like the radio market can, make a hit,
Yeah. So here's a curiosity I have. So let's just say somebody doesn't have 2 years to go down the apprenticeship route, like you, but maybe they have considered or haven't considered two things, which could be mentorship and or association. So mentorship being someone you actually seek out, who has the tools to actually help you and catapult you in some way, or association meaning the people that you actually surround yourself with. Like, talk to me about those two things, because I imagine that's probably closer to how you're learning today versus the apprenticeship route, which is how you started?
Yeah. So I think the magic about being a producer and songwriter and just creative is like you're constantly learning. Like you have to constantly humble yourself, because some new kid is gonna, be doing wilder, crazier things than you that, if you're too boxed into like, oh, I'm gonna, make this for the rest of my life. Like you're just that tiny little moped on the highway going 40 miles an hour while everyone's blasting past you in electric cars, So I think you have to constantly allow yourself to innovate, give yourself space, and I think, now it's really interesting. Like I've leaned a lot on YouTube, and
Fascinating you say YouTube.
Yeah, it's honestly like such a powerful resource.
Yes.
Like the amount of producers and just even artists, like all these things, like I think Studio, and then what's another one, like Masterclass, and all these kind of mixed with the masters. There's a bunch of audio ones that just do deep dives into people's processes and workflows. How did you get this vocal sound? And then there's like super like wizards that, will deconstruct a sound and like create presets, and they'll be like, this is how, Post Malone, how this bass on Sunflower was created or whatever, obscure things that, once you learn those things, it's like, oh, more colors to the palette. I can like be inspired by that and then tweak it and, throw it through like a guitar amp or some shit, like make it like my own. But yeah, I'm still always, learning from the people around me. And I also always open myself up to, other people looking to me for those things as well. And the challenge is, a lot of people just want like that one thing, like that rubric of like, how do I do it? I'm like I was saying earlier, well, you could do it this way and you could get good results doing it this way. But the space, like giving yourself, freedom to experiment and explore, like get good at the basics, get good at like recording. That's a simple skill set that is so valuable. A lot of people don't know how to record. And it's like a hurdle, Can't tell you how many artists I've worked with that come to me and they're like, what you do to my vocals is amazing. And I'm like, there's 3 plugins on this. 3. That's it. Like I just learned how to do it. I learned like over the years, how to put something together that like every time an artist comes in, they're resonating with it. They feel good coming through the microphone. And it's not even about me, it's about them,
So before you keep going down that theme, I just want to translate this to the business world, which is, I think that most entrepreneurs, something that they fail to acknowledge is that if you're running a company, really what you're doing is, if you want to grow something significant, really what you're doing is you're building a marketing company. And I think most people just don't understand marketing. And then they wonder why they're not getting the results that they want. And even a bigger conversation is, how do you actually market in a way that you're proud of? How do you actually build a brand that you can stand by? And something that really aligns with your values. And so I think those are skills worth learning. When you talk about learning the basics, learn the basics of marketing, learn the basics of branding, learn the basics of creating the kind of company that you want to create. So no matter what you start for the rest of your life, you have a set of tools that you can lean on and rely on for everything that you ever work on.
1,000%. Yeah, you like those few sort of fundamental things, once you have those covered, the rest is like experimentation. It's just flow. You give yourself.
That's right.
You're
in the pocket.
Yeah, you're in the pocket, and you don't have to inundate yourself with too many processes, too many like apps, too many plugins. One of the wildest things to me was, the song "Past Life" that I did. And this was a very humbling experience, because I started this record with 3 other friends, buddy Mick Coogan, Jay Stolar, and Carol Addis. And the 4 of us, we wrote this song, very emotionally charged day. Carol was going through some tough thing, and we just all got together. We almost didn't even do the session. I was like, let's go go-karting or something, just to diffuse. But she's like, no, let's write. And then, we were hanging in my studio for like, maybe 2 hours before any music was even made. We were just all sort of like hanging out and supporting her, and then just all of a sudden, guitar chords come out, and then a melody starts. And, actually, I'll never forget this. This was like a moment of channeling. And on one of the wildest experiences, Mick just like was sitting on the couch. I think prior to guitar chords even, I don't know, like where the song was at this point, but he just kind of like, he's kind of in a, maybe on his phone or whatever. And he just stands up and he's like, last night was the last night of my past life. And we all just like kind of glance at each other and we're like, what the fuck was that? That's incredible. Within 15 minutes, the song was written, and such a surreal day. But what happened was, I was trying to really push the needle on music at that point because I saw this like evolution of music going more organic, like reverting back to more organic, heavier, like grunge rock kind of stuff. Live drums. Like no one was doing live drum. I mean, rock bands maybe, but in a pop sense, no one would go near live drums. It was like always, hip hop kind of stuff, which I appreciated, but I wanted to try something different. So like for one of the first times in my like production career, got live drums on a song and live guitar, like live everything. Just went all out in like a band production, and it sounded amazing. Like sounded like a classic, timeless song. I still listen to that demo sometimes, and I'm just like, wow, this feels really good. And the song kind of did its thing with it was with Selena Gomez first, and she loved it, her team loved it, but it was really high because Caroline has like a very high voice. It cuts. It's like super powerful, like pop. And Selena's, she's got more of like a low, like sultry
Soft
tone. Yeah. And so the song wasn't really working for her, but it kind of, found its way to the back burner. It wasn't off the table. It was just on the back burner. And then Trevor Daniel heard the song and loved it and brought it to Phineas, who a lot of people know him as, Billie Eilish's brother, an incredible producer, also amazing artist, and, just a master of minimalism. And here I was, trying to put my vision and my, just to push an agenda with the song. I really wanted it to be this like rock sort of like, live, timeless thing. And what Phineas did was he just took the whole song, all the stems, pitched them down, recorded Trevor, then somehow magically Selena finally fit in because it was in her, zone of genius with that, key wise. And all along I'd been, trying to for whatever reason, the label was like, we're not really comfortable with this production on this song, Phineas came in, added trap drums, and some like cool synthesizers, like very minimal, simple, like kind of what you'd expect, like just what it called for.
Right.
It wasn't, moving the needle on it. It was just what it called for. Mm-hmm. The most like obvious choice. And he just did it with confidence, and I remember hearing it and being like, that sounds fucking badass.
Yeah.
This is dope.
I saw you posted it on your Instagram recently, and I would agree. It's a really good song.
One of my favorites, I've been a part of. And I think it also taught me a huge lesson of like, you don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Sometimes the obvious choice is, it's the best for the piece, super humbling.
Yeah.
Just like, I was almost like pushing too hard on this agenda with it.
And how many times do we do that? I think
Yeah.
we all have a tendency to do that, right? And about finding the essence. So I want to build on this idea, right? This concept of making hits, right? And the reason that I want to dive into this concept is that we had a really interesting conversation yesterday as it relates to how does making a hit relate to actually putting out branding and messaging that has the same visceral reaction that someone would have when they discover a song that resonates for them, right? And that's like, as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, if you're making a commitment to be in business, then by default, you're making a commitment to market yourself. So this is something that is worth mastering. And I don't think that there's a lot of companies that have technically achieved this, though the ones that we love and we rave about and that are very present in our lives, definitely have achieved this. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about this. So you have a song, and you were telling me about, you're kind of feeling, you're at the point where you've kind of finished the production, right? And you're listening to it almost at like different times of day. And like kind of like feeling, you mentioned you got a little head bop going, and to see how it feels, because you want to make someone else feel something. Did I get that right? Mm-hmm. Talk to me about that, like making someone else feel something.
It's interesting because if you're making pop music, you have to be thinking of different, scenarios. You got to be a song for the elevator. You got to be a song for the club sometimes. You got to
all in the same song.
Yeah. Like you got to be popular everywhere, You got to have energy and familiarity, immediacy and urgency.
Familiarity, that's really interesting. I know you mentioned that before when I asked you what do you think makes the difference between a hit and a song that never amounts to that? And you mentioned familiarity. Talk more about that.
So really interesting phenomena with melody shapes and certain sounds. There's a song called, I think this is the one I used to refer to, Torn. I think, do you know, is it? I can't remember exactly who sings Torn, but it's like, nothing's right, I'm torn. Da 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 da. Like it's this like stream of consciousness melody, and kind of doesn't resolve in rhyme. Like there's maybe some internal rhymes, but it's a very like dynamic melody shape. But somehow, every time I listen to that song, even when I first heard that song, it was like I knew the melody. So there's like this indiscernible familiarity sometimes with melody. And it's not always this mathematical, code. It's something that's like baked into us that we can't even really discern, why or what caused that. And I think pop music, the best pop writers, maybe they use math to solve problems. Okay, this melody, like something feels out of whack with it. How can we improve it? Well, let's, dig into the math of it. Let's balance some things out if it needs it. But the best pop writers are always, just writing from like a stream of consciousness in a way, and whatever, they're tapping into is a sense of, I guess in a spiritual context, it'd be like the Akasha, like it's almost like the record of everything that we're all tapped into, and they're just pulling from that and distilling it into 3 minutes, So I think that's one thing, familiarity. You want people to be able to remember that melody. And sometimes, I think lyrics are super important, but I always find lyrics are secondary. And I love incredible lyric writers. I personally love a song with amazing lyrics because it's added depth. But I've listened to songs that are, nonsense with an amazing melody, and I still come back to it. It's like, so that kind of shows me as a producer and writer, that the melody is kind of king, It's a language that transcends language in a way.
So before you go any deeper into that, so I think just that one piece that you talked about a moment ago, I think in the business world, what happens is that we want to be very clever with our words. And there's this concept inside of StoryBrand by Donald Miller, which is don't make people burn calories.
Yeah. Yes.
And so what I see a lot is that when people are actually trying to tell their brand story and everything related to that, in most cases, you don't understand what they're saying. I mean, you go to their website and you read their website and you have no idea what problem they're solving for you.
Yeah.
And it's not clear how this company can actually help you. And so that's kind of just something
it's so synchronistic with music. Burning calories. A lot of people in the context of pop music, a popular brand is like a pop song, you want to achieve a connection with the user, or in the context of music, like the listener, or fan, you hope, the fan, the returning listener. I think with burning calories, that's something that I get a lot of flack for in sessions. Like that's a lot of people know me as like an editor.
Cutting?
Huh?
Because you're cutting?
Not in an emotional way, but like cutting, like I'll trim the fat.
That's right. That's what I mean by that.
Yeah. I trim fat down to, I really love just being able to listen to a song passively and already kind of understand what it's about,
That's right.
And you can be passing by it. You can be in the elevator and you can still pick up on it and be like, oh, that was cool.
This is such an important concept because think about how many people have like incredible things to actually share in the world. I usually find, not always the case, but like usually people who have really important things to say in the world, like incredible products, incredible services, and they can't communicate it in a way that people can actually receive the magic of what they have to offer. And it's sad. It's sad. Like imagine listening to a song that has really deep meaning, but like it just goes over your head. That you just can't get it. You can't follow it. And therefore it can't touch the world. I mean, there's only so many people that maybe that would resonate with, or just is not a song that's going to spread and that people want to share and that has that variety to it. And it's the same exact thing in business. Like you go on someone's website, you read their headline, you have no idea what the hell is it that they do. Like no idea. And then they wonder why they're not having a bigger impact, why they're not, helping more people and doing the thing that they've been called to do. Like, can you understand the thing that, can someone who comes to your world, like understand what is it that you're trying to say immediately?
The biggest trick I use, and it's actually like an embodiment kind of thing, or a mindset shift. And it's funny. I try to think like a 5-year-old. And I know there's some genius fucking 5-year-olds out there. So this is like
so crazy you say that. I mean, literally, copywriting 101. I've had 3 copywriters, and every piece of copy they turn in literally has to be written at a 5th grade level.
Wow. Well, I mean, I would even say go like
even lower. I mean, you're taking lower, it to the next level,
like 3rd grade or kindergarten sometimes, because
that's wild.
That's really saving calories. You want to. It's funny because like album tracks typically are the more depthful, like a little bit more experimental tracks for artists, and then the singles tend to be the calorie savers.
So I imagine some people would probably ask you, like, what does that say about our society?
I think it's humanity it's not necessarily the best trait of ours, but I think it's just our nature to lean into convenience, and I think conservation of energy. It's so like once you understand that that's every person's main objective, conservation of energy. How can I get the most out of the least and save energy? I don't want, we're in the most non-judgmental way. We are born to be lazy. I think like we are born to save our energy and give it to things that we really want to be focusing on, like now that I'm actually talking through it, maybe we're not lazy. Maybe we actually just don't want to be giving energy to things that we don't want to be giving it to. So for example, a real like music appreciator, like someone who just loves lyrics, will go and their MO is gonna be like finding the deepest, most poetic lyrics and songs because they love that depth. Mm-hmm. There's a time and a place for that, for sure. And I believe that people should try to create from that point as well, because that's like, there's a lot of value in that too as an artist. And it's like, you can really touch lives if you get deep in like songwriting and poetry, and there's a lot more like space for using like different kinds of words, and maybe someone actually like has to go look up a word in the dictionary. I've done that before, and it's a fun thing. It's an experience, and it's like a deeper sort of connection that you form with an artist, But I think these lead magnets, like I remember you saying, you believe that like songs are like lead magnets now for a much bigger, picture in an artist's world,
Yeah, the album, and tour, or the songs. Like artists are not, in my opinion, they're not making the kind of money they were making before off of records, just purely records, right? Like you would have to go to a record store to buy a CD, but now that's been completely disrupted.
Yeah.
And you're getting paid a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of a penny for every single stream of a song. So it's like, I mean, of course, if you're Taylor Swift, for example, you're probably making some good chunk of change from that. But, how you're monetizing that looks completely different in today's world.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So I think artists, if your goal is to be a pop artist, I think there's like the internet, social media has changed so many things. We're constantly kind of, pivoting with what pop is, and there's no one size fits all. An indie song could be a pop song and the biggest song of the year, and a rap song could be, and a ballad could be, just piano vocals. So there's really no telling, but I think the common thread between any song that really hits, is familiarity, urgency. It stirs up some energy. Like, it gets you going in some way. It's not passive. People like to say polarizing. I don't necessarily think that's true. I think Adele is a clear example. Like, unanimously loved. Like, I haven't ever come across any person who says, I hate Hello. It's like, yeah, I just haven't. So I don't know if polarizing is necessarily the best descriptor or like analysis of what makes a hit. But then, like, I think there's just some element of magic and luck in it. And, meeting luck with preparation in a way.
Right.
Having a foundation. So many people miss their shot, and it's sad to see. A door opens wide, and it's like, now's your chance to walk through, to run through. A lot of people on labels, like, a door opens, the data is showing,
Right.
There's hype around this. Label, doesn't put the spend in it. And then it's like the momentum dies
The marketing
down.
meaning is not behind the song.
Yeah.
Which is just equally important.
It is super important.
If not more.
Yeah.
Otherwise, no one hears your song.
Yeah. And to go back to the Nelly thing, as an artist, you are the tip of the pyramid, but you really have to make sure that those first two people, and then the four, and like your tree is really dialed in, and that every person is, aligned, at least in like the top executive level of your
team,
company, of yourself.
Basically your team and or associations that are part of your vision.
Yeah, because, if your team, one person on that doesn't really believe in this song you're putting out.
Right. Then it's not going to get the level of support that's needed by the team to actually spread that song.
Yeah. And TikTok makes things very interesting because it's democratized a lot. It's, enabled a single person to be that whole team, a single person to upload something, and it becomes something that streams 400 million times, things like that. And
fascinating.
It is really fascinating. And I think, it's changed the way a lot of people do music, because I think it's made the predictability, like, all right, I have an amazing song, right? I have something that I feel is a hit. With TikTok, it's like,
You get immediate feedback, essentially.
You do, but also there's no forcing it. Whereas before, I think you could, there's still players, that have these structures set up where they can, synthesize that first, They can plant the sapling. They don't have to sit there and water it. They have a sapling that they just plant, and then it starts growing, as long as there's sunlight. But, with TikTok, it's interesting because you can't really force things on there. It's so democratic, so it's been a really interesting environment where, you have hits like songwriters who have had, consistent hits, and then TikTok comes around and it's like, they're pitching and giving their hits that they know are hits, because they've had so many, give them to an artist and the song flops, because there's just whatever is happening with the algorithm, people's attention spans, whatever. So I'm still trying to decode, what TikTok means to the industry. I think a lot of people want more like closeness to artists or recurrence.
Right.
You go on TikTok and it's like a For You page designed to constantly give you something new every day. There's no loyalty, How often do people swipe over to like the following tab? Rarely ever. Like the newness, and with that, there's a disadvantage to the artist who's trying to build a consistent, loyal fan base. Because they might be getting new people consistently, but those people aren't going to see their thing more than that one time.
Yeah.
So
this particular point, I want to land this one. There's something else I want to ask you.
Yeah.
But to land this, I really want to just say to everybody that it's really not that different, in terms of music and creating compelling copy and compelling branding. You said 4 things. You said familiarity, urgency, a big question mark around polarizing, and really magic and luck, which is really skill meeting preparation, or preparation meaning skill and opportunity.
Yeah.
Right. And I really believe that. That's really what it takes in many ways to build a compelling vision and to write compelling copy. But the big piece that I really want to emphasize is that it's the energy. So it's like when you listen to a song that you vibe with, that you love, that you like, it's like you feel it, right? Like there's a song right now that I'm just listening to on repeat, which I told you the other day.
One. Yeah.
And it's just like I feel it, I vibe with it. Like the key word is resonate. It resonates, right? And that same work and creative process that an artist and a producer and everyone else involved in that, making that record, what they had to go through to come up with something that when it lands in front of their ideal listener, their ideal fan, that it has that kind of visceral experience like it's having for me. That's how your audience should feel on the other side of your brand. That's how your audience should feel on the other side of your messaging. It should feel like an answered prayer. It should feel like just good.
Wow, that's really good.
It literally should tap into what they're thinking inside of their mind. There's this concept in marketing of entering the conversation taking place in someone's mind. But no one should ever know that that's ever happening, because it's just happening and they're enjoying the experience and they're being pulled in by that experience. Like it's never a goal for an artist, or I imagine, or a producer, for the listener to be like, wow, like the producer and the artist did this. Like, no, you should just be in the experience. You should just be in the enjoyment of it.
Yeah.
When someone's consuming your branding, when someone's consuming your marketing, your copy, they should just feel pulled in by it. They're not pushed. We're not pushing people into doing anything. We're pulling people and inviting people into our world, and in creating that resonance, people naturally move into action.
Yeah, it's almost like we're like a hue light, and we're just creating like our own little, shade, and just attracting, whichever people love that color in the moment.
That's right.
And people are constantly like, we're in like a superstore of these things. So it's really hard to create that shade that just sticks out, you know?
That's right.
And really resonates. But when you do it, it's like you're finding yourself at home with something. It's like magic when it really connects.
That's right. So I have one more question, and then I want to go into a quick lightning round with you.
Uh-huh.
And this last question is related to this concept that we talked about yesterday, which was the sixth sense.
Mm-hmm.
And in my opinion, I think it's what makes anyone who's creating, who's a creative, that's
Mm-hmm.
actually publishing work, whether it's visual, whether it's written, whether it's a song. I think you either have it or you don't. And if you don't, then you want to get around someone who has it, so that they can help create this as it relates to your vision.
Totally.
And the sixth sense to me is to be able to feel the nuances of whether something feels right or off. And if it feels right, it's like you just know, like, okay, this is ready to publish. This is ready to share. If it feels off, you just know, like, it's not there yet. I don't know why, but we're just not there yet. Like, our messaging isn't there.
Yeah.
Like, this is not going to resonate with our audience. This is not good enough. You know, this song's not good enough. Like, I feel that you have that. Do you believe that somebody can actually develop that?
Yes and no. I think over time you could like maybe learn how to, you could learn like attributes that are associated with that, you know? But for me, when I'm working on a song, it's like I follow this path of chills. You know, I'm
Remember
like,
you mentioning that, the chills.
Yeah. And I was like, you know, the chills are a carrot, you know, and sometimes I get a bite, you know, that's the chills, but it's like an endless rabbit hole, you know? And I think it's hard in music because you never really feel like something is finished. You know, you can always keep refining it. So that's why I say endless, you know? At some point, you just kind of have to use your intuition of like, okay, we've gotten this to an amazing place. Let's let this go and start something new, you know? Because it can be literally endless. Like, oh, but this EQ on this snare, like I could change it just a little bit. Like committing is huge. But in regards to like, you know, a sixth sense, yeah, I think I've noticed some people don't necessarily, and obviously artwork is subjective, you know, but some people don't necessarily have self-awareness around their artwork. And so I think that would be maybe like a lack of the sixth sense. Like there's
Lack of awareness.
A lack of awareness, yeah. But then again, who am I to say that, you know, their work is not, it just doesn't resonate with me. You know, maybe it does with them genuinely. I think at the end of the day, we all know what makes us feel good. And one thing I love, you know, I think it was Rick Rubin that said this, was like, you know, just make what you like. You know, if there's a perspective that I've brought into my work for years, you know, if I'm only making, and it's important in pop, you know, anything that is, you know, you want it to be popular. On one hand, you could make it for the masses. You could use data and analytics and just be like, you know, okay, the masses love songs in C major and at 128 BPM and, with trap drums or, 4 on the floor and like this sound and like all the analytics show that this would be the perfect pop song, right? But you might not even like that, You might like the challenge of creating something that's perfect and like perfectly statistically like, sure to succeed or whatever. But at the end of the day, if you don't like that, there's a chance that no one will like that, even with the statistics. So if you don't like it and they don't like it, no one likes it, right? But as long as you like something, there's always going to be one person. And odds are there are millions, hundreds of millions, billions of people that are cut from the same cloth as you, who resonate with the same kind of thing as you, And so if you really like something, it's a good bet. It's a good indicator that other people will like it. But at the end of the day, who the fuck cares? Make shit that you like. Enjoy your life. And that will fuel other things. It'll fuel,
That's good.
Yeah.
That's good. Yeah. That keeps you inspired. I mean, like.
Yeah. Keeps you coming back for more, keeps you just iterating and, innovating.
Yeah. I love that. Quick lightning round.
Mm-hmm. Love lightning.
What do you know for sure?
Nothing. I know that I am. That's it. That's very physical or metaphysical, but yeah, I know nothing.
Biggest piece of advice to your younger self?
Trust.
Mm-hmm.
Go all in.
Hope for the world.
I keep, one of my biggest meditation, mantras is joy to the world. I want to experience joy, and I really want the world to experience joy. And so that's what I hope for the world is joy. I won't even, like a lot of people say abundance, happiness, whatever, but I think joy, true joy is really powerful.
Favorite book?
Surrender Experiment. Actually, I'm just going to drop like 3. Fuck it. Autobiography of a Yogi, Surrender Experiment, and Untethered Soul.
2 by the same author.
Yeah, you already know. Untethered Soul, I think, maybe takes the cake as number 1. Yeah. Then Autobiography. Then Surrender Experiment. But those 3 are like, man, if you can really embody those or just like immerse yourself in those for a bit,
Yeah.
It's magical.
I got to drop a quick story about the Untethered Soul, which obviously I've told you extensively about. But that book had been sitting on my shelf for over 2 years, and it was only after I had a very powerful kind of inner transformational journey months later that I looked at my bookshelf, and I see that the book is sitting there. And it was like, just like staring at me. It was like, all right, it's time.
Mm-hmm.
Like the title finally spoke to me. And I think usually like things that are meant for you are usually like that. Like they're there for a long time. I know like Kevin Hart, for example, he tells a story about how he really needed money. And his mom just kept on saying, you should really read your Bible. And like literally for like, I don't know exactly how long it was, but it was an extended period of time. And she's like, Mom, but like, I just really need this money. He's been going through a really hard time. And she was like, you should really read your Bible. And fast forward, I think it was a while later after like really like being in the pain of like being in struggle, that he finally opened his Bible, and there behold was money that his mom had put there the entire time to support him as he was going after this comedy thing. That's what it was. He was committing to go to comedy, and he told his mom that if he didn't make it in the next year, that he was going to go to school and do the whole thing that his mom wanted him to do. And it was there literally all along. And in some ways, this book was there all along. And finally, when I picked it up, it was literally my Bible for over 2 years. And so as I was trying to make sense of the emotional roller coaster of being a human, but also an entrepreneur, it was something that I was referencing literally on a daily basis, multiple times a day, as I was making sense of all of that. And when I would go through something, I would just open it up. I would look at the table of contents, and I would choose a chapter that I felt most resonated with me, that I needed in that moment. And I would go to that chapter and I would choose a random page. And most times all it took was 2 paragraphs. And I was like, I got exactly what I needed. I would close the book. I would do the work and then move on. And that was the work for so many times. So I can't recommend that book enough to people. And I think what the Surrender Experiment did for me, which is the other title, was that I think it helped me make sense of not needing to be in control and the magic that can unfold when you actually make space for that something better, which we started this conversation talking
Full
about.
circle. Yeah.
Full circle.
Yeah.
Full circle. Top productivity hack?
To-do lists. Having like a calendar. Also, this is like one of the biggest things that changed my life from the day I started it. As soon as you wake up, don't open your eyes. If you have to open your eyes, but take 30 seconds. That's all it takes. If you can do longer, great. 15 seconds, even 5. What is time? Lay there and just tap into the day and just be like, I let go of whatever happened yesterday, the good and the bad. Today's a new day. What does today want to be? How am I going to show up today? I'm going to be, today's going to be the best day of my life, and give the day a little bit of joy and gratitude right from the jump. And people do, extensive gratitude exercises, all these things, which I think are insanely powerful for sure. But we're so inundated with things we have to do, that, those things can be distracting, or we just don't have time. We feel like we don't have time to sit there for 15, 20, 30 minutes to meditate. It doesn't take that long. What I've noticed is the days that I do this are immeasurably better days, and better in every sense of the word. Better, more joy, immediate sense of fulfillment and productivity, because I'm just tapped in to the day. So that I would say, that's an incredible productivity hack.
Dude, there's so many more things that we can talk about. I feel like it's like an endless amount of things that we can chat about. We didn't even get into Verified and everything else that you're working on, but that's something that I would very highly encourage people to look into, which is one of your projects called Verify. And I just want to thank you, man. Thank you for being on the show. Thank you for sharing everything that you did here today. And I just want to remind everybody, I think we did a good job of doing this throughout the conversation, but I just want to remind everybody that ideas from industries that are not related to yours are some of the places where you can get literally some of the best ideas. And so, I hope that you listen to this conversation through the lens of, how does this apply to me? How can I take these ideas and apply it to my industry? Ideas from an old industry, which are normal and common practice there, applied to a new industry. That's called an innovation. And there's so many that you can take away here from this conversation to do the work that you're here to do. And I know if you're listening to this podcast and the show and you've listened this long, that there's amazing things that you're here to do. And with that being said, Sean, I want to ask you, if people want to stay connected and or find out more about what you have going on, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, my website is Sean Myer, Myer. There's no Meyer and no S at the end. I kind of fucked myself when I changed my name. I thought I was simplifying it, but I actually made it more complicated. So Sean Myer, Myer.com. And that's like an amalgamation of, all the stuff that I have, links to music, links to, I offer, coaching session or like one-on-one
creative coaching,
mentorship sort of sessions, which I love doing that. And eventually, once we launch Verified, which, it's a whole other conversation. It's just, that's going to be a wild one. But vrfd.ai is a little project I'm working on that I think will be extremely transformative for not only music, but the world. And Instagram is always a great way, I am, and then my name, Sean, Seanmyer. And there you can, see what I've worked on, see all the links, like, DM me one-on-one. So all those, and then, I'm just excited to, have connected today on it's like every conversation, we just go deeper and uncover new layers, so thank you so much, man.
Yeah.
It's always a pleasure.
I'm walking away with so many nuances to even streamline a lot of things that I'm doing. So thank you for sharing everything that you did. And I just want to say for anyone watching, if you guys want to continue the conversation, I'm going to talk to you directly here. If you guys want to continue the conversation and get my notes on this conversation with Sean and what my key takeaways are, I really want to encourage you to go to businesswithintegrity.com and find where you can subscribe to our newsletter, where I'll be sharing all of my follow-up thoughts. And as always, go out there, do great work, and be generous.
Be generous.
Be generous.
Be generous.
Thank you, brother.
Ellen, be generous.
Ellen, be generous. I love it, man. Boom.